The Barcode Podcast is presented by Titanium CPG Insurance. Titanium protects forward-thinking consumer brands with a range of commercial insurance products and risk management services designed specifically for natural and organic food and beverage companies. Learn more at titaniumcpg.com. Welcome to the Barcode Podcast, where we equip emerging consumer brands. I'm Ben Ponder, and at Barcode, we're here to give our listeners the knowledge and tools you need to thrive in the marketplace. A few years ago, Forrest and Taylor Collins were faced with the enviable but still vexing problem of having created a new product that was flying off store shelves. They were growing quickly and needed help in managing that growth. They turned to their friend and our guest today on the Barcode Podcast, Robby Sansom. Robby is one of those behind-the-scenes, unsung heroes of CPG that just gets stuff done. We'll talk with Robby about what he did to help grow Epic from a handful of people working with the founders to their eventual acquisition by General Mills. We'll also talk about his new venture, Force of Nature Meats, and how they're hoping to revolutionize food production through sustainable agriculture. I'm really happy to have my friend Robby Sansom recently of Force of Nature Meats with us today, and many people will be familiar with Epic Provisions, where Robby was a key part of growing that brand for several years, both prior to and after the General Mills acquisition. We're going to go into all the exciting ins and outs of that, and I'm really, really thankful that Robby has joined us today. I want to ask you a question that takes you back a little bit. Certainly, we're going to talk a lot about food and agriculture and things like that, but I want you to go back and describe for us your favorite childhood meal, right? So maybe it's something that somebody in your family would have made for you for a special birthday meal, or maybe it was something that one of your grandparents made. But tell us about that meal. Like, what was it that really connected with you as a kid?
It's an awesome question. First, thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be here, and we are old friends, so it's fun to be here doing this with you, and I'm looking forward to telling the stories and getting excited as I talk about both what we've done and what we're hoping to continue to do with Epic, and the great things we're pursuing with Force of Nature, and how everybody listening can help be a part of a solutions-based agriculture system. So
I'm excited too.
It's actually an easy question for me.
Some people it's not. That's fascinating when it's like you just know.
I probably have two answers, and it has as much to do with the situation, right? It's about who you're with and where you are and the sort of emotion and memory that it invokes. So for me, it's twofold. One is my family and my broader family, cousins, aunts, uncles, great aunts, grandparents. Every year we do a 1-week vacation down in Port Aransas on the beach. And I just have the fondest memories of us all going out and fishing and catching our own speckled trout or redfish or flounder. And then going back and preparing these massive feasts because we had our whole family there, right? And sitting around a table and just, sharing stories and laughing and feasting on, just this awesome, tasty food. And then and the second thing is, largely similar. Every year, and even to this day, for my birthday, my mother generously prepares a massive feast of fried venison. And it's sort of, my guilty pleasure for the year. But, as I've gotten older and more educated and more particular in my sourcing standards, so have we've gone to gluten-free and better oils. And
you supply the venison now.
Yeah, we're doing cauliflower instead of mashed potatoes and stuff like that. But it's home cooking, it's family, it's friends, there's an occasion of celebration, and just connecting all the way from the front lines of our food, right? On the coast, we were catching our own fish, then we're harvesting our own venison, and we're bringing all of the incredible memories and camaraderie that comes from being on the land and experiencing those sort of adventures together, all the way through to nourishing your family and sharing those times and moments of community that are special that you'll cherish forever.
That's one reason why food is so powerful, right? It's so fundamental. It's a building block of our culture, of our memory. And there's the taste, there's the olfactory sense. It triggers so many recollections from our childhood or key moments of our lives. And I think it's really interesting how the decisions that we make around food, independently and in community, reverberate throughout our lives. So thanks for sharing that. So what I'm curious, I want to start. We're going to talk some business stuff. We're going to talk some agriculture stuff, but let's go back a little bit and tell me, how did you first meet Katie Forrest and Taylor Collins?
It goes way back. My first memories of Katie are of a young girl that was best friends or great friends with my next door neighbor growing up in our neighborhood here in Austin. So we grew up in the same neighborhood, and knew a lot of the same people and crossed paths and had that sort of acquaintanceship of appreciation for one another from all the way elementary age, right? And then fast forward for me to middle school, and Taylor and I went to the same middle school and to the same high school. We weren't exactly best friends, but we had really great appreciation for one another and that acquaintanceship. And we played sports together, and we always thought highly of one another, even though we weren't necessarily going out and spending all our time together. Taylor and I are a little bit older, so we were seniors in high school at Austin High when Katie was a freshman, and so they kind of have their story of maybe, passing in the hall one time, and then later they went on to college and met each other, right? And so
I believe it was Taylor being blown to one side of the hallway is the way that I've heard him put it. So
Taylor puts things in a way that only he can put them.
That's right.
But so I knew, I essentially knew them before they knew each other. And then again, fast forward to them, being overtaken by the entrepreneurial spirit and joining forces and life partnership and becoming, as they would call it, lovers in college at Texas State. And, I learned about Thunderbird and reached out and said, hey, I've gone this very formal business, get a master's degree and an undergraduate degree from UT, go to big consulting, Deloitte level, stuff all the way down to some smaller local regional things. And I had at that point gone into the startup world and was working with a really successful startup at the time, and just kind of reached out and said, hey, this is neat what you're doing, this little thing y'all have created. If I can ever be of any help, let me know. I just, I want to support you guys. I believe in you and believe in your missions and, help creating healthier and better food and for active lifestyles at the time.
So this was at the Thunderbird stage. So Epic hasn't happened yet. So that means that Taylor and Katie are still vegans at this point, right? So Thunderbird was really a different mission that evolved into Epic through their own story, and we don't necessarily have to retell that part of it. But how did you interface? Yeah, so you've begun to say, hey, I reached out. Congratulations, guys, you're doing it. If I can ever help you, let me know. And then where in the mix, in that transition from Thunderbird Bar to Epic Bar, how did you actually end up joining the team?
We were reconnecting post Thunderbird initiation or startup. I was also doing triathlons and getting outside and doing what I would call adventuring, just finding fun and crazy ways to make myself sweat and suffer in the hot Texas summers. And we'd occasionally go out on bike rides, and of course they'd bring their unfit for packaging Thunderbird bars in little Ziploc baggies that look like giant bricks of fruits and vegetables and stuff. But we just stayed in touch. And meanwhile, the startup I was working with, we were number 21 on the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies my first year, and number 186 my second year. And I was overseeing everything from a production studio to application development to online, to legal, to digital marketing, accounting and finance, and the member services department of over 20 people. So I had 85 people reporting to me in this massive, successful startup, and I knew a very little bit about a lot of stuff, right? I knew enough to know what I don't know and to know where to go get help. And so that was my offer to them was, hey, I can help be a guide with this neat little thing you guys have going on.
Right.
And fast forward a few years, and I get wind from them of this idea about this meat bar, which seems a little zany. But
many innovations are initially zany.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, then of course, I tried it and talked with them about it and realized, holy cow, this is brilliant. And I'm a customer for sure. And I know there's a lot of people like me, and so I still wanted to help. And again, it was just for me thinking, hey, I can support two old friends in their pursuits and doing something that I think is really special. but never really thinking that there was a future for all of us to align, right? Until, again, fast forward, I had left that startup for a variety of reasons and had decided I was going to take a sabbatical and spend 6 months traveling and talking to people and figure out what's going on. And I was on a path to move to Houston to go work in oil and gas. Not directly in mining, though, in logistics.
Let's pause for a second. Where, for that 6 month sabbatical, where were you traveling to? Like what was on your itinerary?
Oh man, a lot of it was local stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it was trying to get out to the places that I love more. We have a lease out in Llano, and we have some friends that have land out on the coast. And I like being outside. I think it fulfills me, mm-hmm. and it energizes me and balances me out. But also I went to Kauai, I went to Croatia, I went to Czech Republic, Austria. I can't think of all of the places off the top of my head, but a lot of really great places.
Did those travels, coming out of that go startup phase, did those travels impact your thinking about the world, about your career trajectory personally? How did seeing and experiencing all of that stuff impact you?
Well, for me, it was coming out of, having had experience in multiple disciplines within business and then broader strategy. And then again, in the startup space where you are in charge of a lot of people, and I've seen ups and downs. It was, hey, there's something about this. I don't want to go back to be in a big system, be a cog in a big wheel. I'm not totally sure what the next step is. Let's do two things. Let's grow personally and individually, and let's meet as many people as I can. And so that period of time, I set a goal, and it was I want to spend 6 months traveling to grow as a person. And when I'm not on the road, I want to be meeting with as many people in the local Austin community across industries and learning. I just wanted to listen. I wanted to understand people's paths, their passions, what they feel they made great decisions about in their careers, and where they wish they had done things differently, and hope that could inform me where the best opportunity that aligned with my personal desires would be. And that meant scheduling at least a lunch and a breakfast coffee every single day, and then every single meeting, my single only goal besides listening was to get them to introduce me to one new person I didn't know.
That's really amazing. That's this awesome kind of learner listener mentality that I'm sure benefited you tremendously at the time and subsequently.
It was a really awesome experience, and something I definitely recommend. Every time I see somebody jump straight from one career into another and take less than take the weekend off or less than 2 weeks off, I always try to suggest that maybe they consider giving themselves a little more time. And I'd say the other thing too is just the perspective it gives you, not having an income and having to, it's not like I was a bajillionaire with a ton of resources. There was a lot of, peanut butter and honey sandwiches, and a lot of working out, and a lot of, just becoming comfortable with, hey, you know what? The things that you might think is when you get caught up in the day-to-day that lead to happiness don't necessarily. And you can be happy and live on a really constrained budget and feel completely that you're celebrating life.
Yeah.
And that's an important lesson to learn as you move back into the career world, where sometimes you can lose sight of the fact that it doesn't take a lot, and pursuit of wealth may not be the answer for happiness.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Okay, so fast forwarding now, you've traveled, you've kind of sucked the marrow out of life in this season, and you think you're moving to this energy-oriented Houston career path. What happened then?
Yeah, so I was going to go work for what was essentially a private equity-backed logistics organization, and they were in the process of purchasing multiple companies in California and Oregon and Texas, and wanted my help to roll them all up, bundle it in a nice bow. And again, this is in the time of discovery of Eagle Ford shale and fracking, so oil's booming, and nobody really knows the true implications. We have a lot of learning since then and data that tells us the challenges that make me very thankful that I didn't stumble into the wrong path there. But I had at Katie and Taylor, I had reached out to them. We were maintaining that sort of like occasional bike ride and coffee and touching base, and they kind of said, "Hey, this is really working. This new meat thing is only a couple months old, but it's already overtaking our old vegan energy bar business, right? And it's actually growing so rapidly and scaling so much that it's a little unwieldy for us, and we could use the support of somebody that knows how to manage a fast growth and bring some process and predictability. And actually, there's some larger, we're looking at exploring getting support beyond our angel backers, and they have different set of expectations for how you manage the business and how you produce, reporting for the business.
We have to professionalize this startup. Yeah.
And we could use some help with that. And, my thought was, great, I'd love to help you with that. I can definitely give you guidance. Let me look at what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish, and show me the role you have in mind. And I know a ton of people in town. I've been networking for the last 10 years. I can help you find the right person for that. And that probably was about a month before I was set to move to Houston. So they send me that, and I'm about a week from going on a 2-week trip. That will be my last hurrah before I move to Houston. Finally uproot from Austin, what I love and never wanted to leave, but as a last resort. My goal was 6 months of learning, and this was the 6-month mark, and it was time to move on. And this was, in the world of academia and the professional world I came from, this was a pretty remarkable opportunity.
Sure.
I saw what they were looking for, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is actually really cool. If this business wasn't so tiny and small, it would be really exciting, and I'd love to do the job. But it's, there's no way that I can go from what I've achieved in my career and the level that I'm at and the opportunity I have before me to go do this. And so I kind of just sent Taylor an email just saying, hey, geez, this is really cool. I'm definitely going to help you guys because I'm excited about it. But I wish the timing were different, and this could be right for me. And we kind of had emails that crossed, and he was like, holy cow, I just looked at more about what you've been doing, and you'd be so perfect for this. I wish you weren't taking this other thing. And we, just kind of acknowledged that, and I went on a 2-week vacation. And over that 2 weeks, I talked to Katie and Taylor, I think almost every single night at about, between 1 and 3 in the morning my time, and, about 6 or 7 o'clock at night their time. And we just decided, okay, this is crazy, but let's really try this thing. And, they brought me on.
Maybe it could actually work.
Yeah, and we came to an agreement where they brought me on at a level that was significantly greater than the two of them combined, financially, which was a huge fear and risk, and it was scary for them. But they thought they were going to take a chance on me, and I was turning down what would seem to be a remarkable opportunity to take a chance on them, and it was definitely some nervous beginnings. There was tears and frustration, and I always joke with people from General Mills that I was the suit that came in before General Mills.
All the suits. That's right.
Yeah.
How that's a really fascinating moment because I think for a lot of people, they would assume that really what Taylor and Katie should have done is they should have found someone who came from a big food background at that point. But you didn't. You had a startup background, and you had this multidisciplinary approach and expertise. How did your naivete help you or hurt you in those early years when you, again, because this wasn't what you had been doing up to that point?
I think a lot of what it takes to be, the role that I moved in at was CFO and COO, and in a lot of ways over time, general manager. So the way it worked out is Katie and Taylor and I sort of democratically ran and built Epic together, and they did a wonderful job of being the owners and the founders and the ultimate decision makers. But truly, there was times where I would overrule the two of them, and me and Taylor might disagree with Katie, or me and Katie might disagree with Taylor, and they did a really great job of being graceful with how they and their willingness to approach that. But for me, day one, it was like you had said a moment ago: how do we professionalize this, and not in the bureaucratic corporate sense, but how do we get more out of what we have? And a lot of that was, kind of the basic fundamental stuff I'd learned in running businesses previously, and particularly businesses that are in a dynamic phase of growth. And what I told the team my first day there was, my job here is to to do two things. One, make sure that success is really clearly defined for everybody and you know your place in that. And two, to make sure that you have the tools to be successful. And it really doesn't extend far beyond that, right? And of course, a lot goes into that. But
of course, what did the team look like at that point?
There was an established Thunderbird business that had been around for a few years, and while it had grown, it hadn't grown considerably, but it justified having, a designer in place and a person in operations and a couple people in a warehouse/manufacturing facility, an office team, I should say an office manager and an intern, and then somebody helping out with marketing again with Katie and Taylor as well. So
who were both very involved in marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would say marketing in the sense of creative, innovation, brand building,
right.
Casting this very aspirational vision. So to go to the naivete part, we were all naive, right? I mean, we all had enough experience to function. And I think that for me, success came from being able to take that team of inexperienced people and develop them. And align them and bring some clarity into our purpose and to help motivate everybody. And that motivation and sense of purpose became a force multiplier or an advantage for us. I think being naive across the board and that lack of experience didn't blind us with preconceived notion and conventional ways of thinking. So we were truly willing to challenge things, whether we knew it or not. Oftentimes intentionally and oftentimes unintentionally, innovating new ways of doing stuff or just trying things that ended out working out that we never would have tried if we had come in with a playbook of this is the only way or this is the right way or this is the best way to do it.
To me, I think that's part of the power of the innovation that you guys experienced. Taylor and Katie have told me the story of when they transitioned from being vegans to meat eaters, they didn't know how to cook a steak, and so they boiled it, right? Something that most people would never even contemplate doing. They sort of backed their way into these just a radically different approach to everything, really, from top to bottom, like how you prepare food, how you think about what it is to build a brand, how you think about what it is to build a team and a culture, everything. And so you didn't come with a lot of, I think, rigid expectations or notions of this is the way you have to do it every time. This is how we did it at my last 3 food startups or something along those lines. And that gives you a certain freedom to experiment and to try some new stuff, which I know you guys did.
Yeah, well, and that combined with a healthy risk tolerance and an incredible bias for action. I think saying that we were in we often found ourselves in a place of ready, fire, aim might be generous. We might have moved even faster than that on occasion. Right. So,
just fire all the time. So okay, so you dive in now to what was fast becoming the Epic Provisions business. How did you, as an outsider to the food industry, how did you learn that business? Like, what was your methodology? Were you deliberate in thinking, all right, I need to understand how this whole meat thing works, or did you just find yourself in situations where you accreted knowledge over time?
Apologies to your listeners in advance for my long-winded answers. This one's a little bit of a deeper story.
This is awesome.
I didn't know quite what I was prepared for. And I knew the results. I knew what Epic was becoming, and I saw. I did my diligence coming in on the business, but you never really know what you're getting into until you're immersed in it. And I think it'd be nice to say I just jumped in and started learning CPG and we were humming along, and it was just the story of efficiency and scale, right? But
in the real story, and that's one of the things that I really love, because there's the staged level story where, look, here's a ribbon, it was so perfect and everything followed this very linear path. Rarely is the real story, right? So it's okay. I think it's actually helpful to listeners and to startup founders and aspiring entrepreneurs to hear, like, yeah, I didn't have it all figured out, and I had to stumble my way through this.
Yeah, exactly. For us, it was my first week on the job, my first day on the job, after, of course, calling this company that was expecting me to move there in 3 days and saying, hey, I'm not coming, and calling my realtor that was looking for houses for me to move to in Houston saying, hey, I'm not coming. Walk in to the office and say, hey, I'm here. I'm excited. Like, this is a huge leap of faith for all of us. What's our plan? What does my onboarding look like? What are my priorities? Let's get going. And, we're sitting in a conference room table and Katie and Taylor look at each other and they're kind of look strangely back at me and just come back with, we were hoping you would tell us. And
that's a very startup moment.
Yeah, and a little bit of an awkward pause and a gulp. Just thinking, okay, well, that's all right. We can build a plan together right now. What's our 1 year plan look like right now? What are our goals? Give me a role description of everybody on our team so we know what they're doing and we can make sure they're focused on the highest and best use of their time. And let's look at what's in place right now so we can figure out how to identify the best next moves for us. And the similar sort of reaction and response of, we don't really have that.
We should work on that.
So it really quickly became, okay, let's figure out where we're headed because we're doing stuff and we're busy and it's clearly, we're clearly onto something. And if we can focus that, our opportunities are going to be greater, our chances are going to be better.
How did you know at that point that you were onto something?
Was
it just because people seemed excited? Was it because, wow, we can't make enough? It's selling so much. I think for a lot of startups, that's even an elusive concept. How do you know you're onto something?
There was tangible and anecdotal evidence out there, right? So I think you could look at the financial data and say, hey, this brand that's only a couple of months old is already outperforming this brand that's over 2 years old,
right?
In Thunderbird, and there was another brand in that equation called Gatherer. As they moved to a lower carb opportunity that was more seeds and nuts. They were doing something that was working in a space that was working that they understood, and then to have this new item come on and get such a great reception from consumers and retail customers they already had relationships with was obviously a clear indication, right? And then there was other anecdotal stuff, right? Like the press picking up and it being provocative, and then of course just the allure of Katie and Taylor. They're just such unique individuals and they're so inspiring, and it's. You listen to them tell stories and the journey and their ideals and their vision is extremely romantic, and it's easy to say, hey, you know what, investing 101 or believing in something 101, you gotta believe in people, and those are two people that are real easy to understand that again there's something special there, and I believe in them.
They're passionate, they're charismatic, all of those things. Yes, okay, that's good.
So coming out of that, those first days, not knowing what was in store for me or the business, we wanted to clean stuff up. And on the back end too, I was the COO and CFO. And so there was just some things that I was working on my own. Like you mentioned, we got to professionalize, we got to standardize some stuff and make sure our reporting is valid for anybody that might want to, loan us money or invest in us, et cetera. I think it was my second or third day on the job that I realized that we were going to run out of money before payroll on Friday.
That's a good moment.
And again, this is after I had just walked away from this like VP level, in this $1 billion company, number 2 to the CFO.
Right.
Again, from the academic background that I was in, having heard my whole life that, if you do what you love, success will follow.
Right.
I was in a school of, success is what success is defined by as the industry. And I had turned down something that met that definition of success because I was trying to pursue what I loved. And, here I am, maybe 72 hours in realizing this was probably the biggest mistake I'd ever made.
Wow.
Or fearing that, not realizing it, but having those thoughts resonate when I realized that, even the compromise and negotiated, salary and all that is now
like, oh, we can't afford to pay me that.
So within my first 3 months there, we had secured a bridge loan so that we could continue to support our people and our business that in all ways other than cash was going well. And we had actually sold the Thunderbird brand and the Gather brand to some really aligned individuals who were investors and who truly believed in and wanted to continue to champion the values of those brands. And we had closed a round of venture capital funding, in addition to having a 1 year plan laid out, and had communicated that to the team and had clarified their role in that and got everybody fired up around some annual goals and some some more aspirational goals. And
How long did that process take for you guys? How long did, again, from you discovering, oh my gosh, we're about to run out of money, to, okay, let's get this secured and we have VC backing and some other things like that? Like, was that a few weeks, a few months? How long did it take?
No, yeah. So that was a 3-month process, right?
Okay.
So I started on 9/15, and by the first week of December, again, we had closed a multi-million-dollar round of funding. We had sold those 2 brands for a good chunk of change, and we'd put all of our plans in place and secured that bridge loan. And it was basically about 2 months.
So that was a busy 2 months.
There was a lot going on. And then again, going back to your original question too, how do you learn that's just business 101 and fundamentals, which is an important part of everything. But then there's the nuance of the industry that you're in. Mm-hmm. And so, we were fortunate for Epic in that we were able to leverage the experience of the team with Thunderbird, as well as the relationships of the team with Thunderbird, which is critically important. And then, for me, it was diving in, and sitting in on meetings and asking questions and reading, books from people that had, led mission-driven businesses in this space before, that had been revolutionary in changing the system that they were a part of. And it wasn't just the industry, right? It was our mission. I already was a conservationist. I already knew about wildlife and ecosystem and habitat. And I was already eating clean and had already been, eating a more paleo or more ancestral diet of clean fruits and vegetables, and lowering carb and sugar intake, and,
right.
and so on. But there was this concept of regenerative agriculture and animal agriculture, and the implications of our conventional, commoditized, centralized, industrialized food system, and the scale to which all those things were significant factors in numerous global challenges that we're facing and still face today. And so there was a lot of reading and research and attending conferences, again, both on the industry side and on the subject matter side, to become, ultimately somewhat of an expert in the space of agriculture and regenerative agriculture, acknowledging that there are people that can run circles around me and people that can run circles around those people. But, I know a lot more than the average person, fortunately, and I'm still learning.
Absolutely. And I feel like, you guys, like, to your point, Epic, really from its genesis, was a highly mission-based organization, right? So you guys, and Taylor and Katie, as well as you, are very values-driven people and principled people, and so it was never about, oh, how do I just make a buck selling bars, right? So you were clearly that came through at every phase of the journey, but it did seem like, as you guys learned more about meat, right? You have this bar company that's growing rapidly, and you're sourcing meat, and along that journey, as you're talking about, you're learning about how does agriculture really work, and especially at scale, right? And you'd already been familiar with conservation and maybe even some of the smaller format agriculture things, but as you guys grew, you had to buy more meat, right? And so then you learn about this process. Talk to us some about how you discovered that, like, regenerative agriculture, because that's certainly a major theme, that a strand that connects both your Epic Provisions journey and your new venture, Force of Nature, is the passion that you and your co-founders have developed over the last few years for regenerative agriculture, and specifically how it impacts our diets and climate, and how we care for nature and all of those things. Talk us through that journey. Obviously, you read some books, but lots of us read books. There was more to it than that, wasn't there?
Absolutely, right. And without getting too far into the founding story of Epic, I think it's important just to remind folks listening that the reason that even became a part of the journey was, again, a pursuit, with Katie and Taylor and their vision for creating cleaner, better food that was convenient and portable and packable, right? And that originally began with a vegan product, and then they realized that their health and their diet, for one, and necessitated a better version of that with a healthy and clean meat product. And so they came up with that product, right? And then it was, well, we want this to be healthy, so we got to source the best meat. And it turns out that the best meat comes from healthy animals, and it turns out that healthy animals come from healthy ecosystems. Really, truly, in peeling back the layers of the onion, that was a process and a journey that we were on. We didn't know where it was taking us, but we knew that to do the right thing and to have the best product, we had to continue to have a thirst for learning and a thirst for pushing our boundaries and our comfort zones in the system to explore what the potential was. Because we knew the shortcomings of meat that everybody hears about, that's assigned to an entire industry unfairly. But we were starting to learn about this world, this smaller world of groups of not-for-profits and researchers that were saying, hey, we can work with nature, we can work within the system, and we can celebrate balance in biology. We don't have to use chemistry and mechanical engineering to fight and combat nature and chemical warfare against our agriculture lands, right?
Absolutely. And I feel like you guys did something that a lot of early stage brands don't do. And that is, I remember you guys traveled, you developed relationships with these farmers and ranchers in a way that most people think, oh, I'll get to that someday. But that was really an important part of the journey and learning for you guys too, right? Was actually visiting the farms and seeing how it works, seeing the difference between a small regenerative operation and a giant feedlot operation.
Absolutely. Once it became clear what the objective was becoming, the necessity to source these types of meats, then it was, where do we find them, right? And then it became sort of a parallel path of learning, right? Both in how do we gain access to, and where there's not access, how do we create it and build a supply chain, and then simultaneously learning about how the challenges on the land that become obstacles and hurdles to address. We visited a lot of ranches in a lot of different geographies and different continents and different species of animals, and realize that, just like with so many things in life, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and not everybody has the same financial resources, not everybody has the same human resources, not everybody has the same knowledge, not everybody has the same ecosystem that they're trying to work within, and to come in and act as if we have the answer, and to prescribe for others what they need to do to make improvements would be naive.
Right.
And instead, what we should do is focus on outcomes and how we can support them in producing within their context outcomes that align with what we want to see and what our end consumers are looking for. And that's where we began to really learn where this movement was relative to the size and scale of the meat industry, where consumers were and knowledge and understanding of these issues, and where producers were in terms of desiring actually to be better, but having to accept and work within a system that can be punitive towards people who try to do that, and significantly so.
Right. Yeah. So I want to dive in. We'll go into much greater depth around some of that, what you've learned around regenerative ag in a minute. But I want to, and this definitely ties into the topic, as you guys, so Epic Bar and Epic Provisions continue to grow, and the opportunity surfaced for you guys to be acquired by General Mills. And I know that at least part of the calculus there related to your team's ability to impact this giant big food operation and to have a meaningful impact around an approach to sustainability and an approach to agriculture. How did that fit into the decision to be acquired, and then what was that journey like as you began to integrate into a larger traditional big food company?
In those first couple of days, in my robust onboarding process, one of the questions I asked Katie and Taylor was, what are the goals of this business, right? Is this something that's going to be a family-run business for you, that you're looking to find a way to make sure that one day your children are in the seat that you're in and taking care of and stewarding this, or are you trying to sell this rapidly, or what is your definition of success? What are we pursuing here? And their response to me was, we're not looking to just grow this thing to sell it. We don't have an end in mind. And it'd be great if one day we were running it, but that's not an end that we have in mind either. What we're really looking for is to advance this mission and to be the best stewards for it that we can. And we recognize that at some point, we may not be the best suited. There may come a scale where we need help, or some other other people or another organization may be more capable of succeeding in those pursuits than us. And the example that they gave at the time was, for example, we would never sell to a company like General Mills.
Of course. Isn't that how it always works?
I mean, to think that they gave an example and only one, and it was that company. But, I think that's an important thing to note. And we should circle back on that in a minute, because we got to talk about what success looks like when it comes to changing food.
Absolutely.
And why we were where a lot of people are today, and why we might all benefit from thinking about that differently. But, the General Mills team would routinely reach out and try to contact us or buy products from us through our e-commerce store, and we would cancel the orders every time. We're like, if you're going to reverse engineer our products, you go to our retailers and boost our metrics to do it. We're not gonna make it easy for you.
I love it. Sometimes we would just write handwritten notes and actually still mail it, just like, hey, thanks, really appreciate your fandom.
And eventually they came and said, hey guys, look, we got this 301 Inc. thing going. We're investing in brands, and you guys are making this really hard on us, but we're super interested in what you're doing. We'd love to talk with you. And we just said, look, we're not interested in taking your money. We got plenty of people that want to give us money. We don't need your resources. We're doing just fine. Maybe you could make us an offer we couldn't refuse for an acquisition, but other than that, we're perfectly content continuing to push this thing along. And they came back and said, well, maybe that might be something that we should discuss. Was that a calculated move at the time?
From your perspective?
Somewhat. We were getting large, and we were getting more complexity into our business, and there's always challenges and there's always struggles. And again, when you're facing so much and you have a lean team, and we're operating on a lean budget, and we're truly celebrating our value of doing more with less. Mm-hmm. Definitely there's an appeal to getting a support from a larger organization that has resources that can aid in all of the areas that feel like your biggest pressure points.
Right.
That said, we still had that preconceived mindset of big is bad. And, when they came back and said, hey, we could talk about this, we turned around and said, look, you guys can go pound sand, right? Like, we are not going to ever truly entertain that. It's interesting to know that you might, but you are going to cause a compromise in the values of our products, and you are going to make changes and adjustments that will be harmful to our partners. And we consider the people who are family-run businesses that package the products and process the products, as well as the producers on the land who we've now built relationships and have truly, in every sense of the word, bet the farm on us. And thirdly, you're going to do the same in terms of disrupting and harming our employees. And for those three reasons, we would never truly entertain a conversation with you. They came back, and they, at this stage, they had brought John Forker, founder of Annie's, into the equation, and said essentially, no, you don't understand. We're a big organization that is slowly declining on the top line every year, and it's very clear that consumers are changing their behavior. And you guys are onto something special, because your top line is growing at greater than triple digits every year. And we would recognize that if we were to acquire this brand, that we would be fools to change what is working from a secret recipe. And further, we don't have the capabilities or the technology to do what your partners do. Mm-hmm. We don't have any other brands that rely on the sourcing that your sort of sourcing does. We're not going to compromise the product, because the product is what is special. And we're not going to compromise the team, because the team is what is special in enabling all of this. And so for those three reasons, you're wrong in judging us with your preconceived notions. And actually, we're looking to not only celebrate this brand, but learn from you and learn how we can be better as a broader organization. And that, sort of took the air out of all of us and said, oh my gosh, wait a minute. Like, this is an opportunity to not only make Epic leaps and bounds more influential and impactful against its own mission. This is an opportunity to change a multi-billion-dollar international food brand, and to make it better for its employees and the communities that it impacts and the consumers that it ultimately nourishes and the lands that are impacted by all of it, right? And so the next, I'll spare the long journey of diligence that was also incredibly taxing and trialing and frustrating, but
just suffice it to say, you don't get an offer one day and then a big check or a wire of money the next day.
6 months of no sleep and blood, sweat, and tears, and having to keep secrets from people that you care about, and be in some ways, lack transparency when that's truly a fundamental value for you, which feels inauthentic.
Right.
And not even telling your family what's going on, and so on. It's a hard process, but ultimately it came down to a decision point where Katie and Taylor and I were sitting in our office in our headquarters, and I'd prepared some models, and all of our advisors and investors and mentors were saying, don't sell. And don't sell on the premise that you guys don't need to sell from a traditional business standpoint. You're on a rocket ship, you're growing. If you wait a year, you're gonna make way more money. We had this model that showed, the sort of opportunity that might appear as we make a decision to do something now versus doing something later. And I remember it vividly. We were the three of us. It was highly emotional. It was highly energized and intense. And I remember Katie, particularly, in tears with all of us, and just saying, "Look, guys, I look at this number, and it's a bigger number than anything I can imagine or have fathomed. And I look at that number, and it's even bigger, but I can't even appreciate the scale. What I do know is, if we wait even 1 year to pursue that larger number, that's a year that we're sacrificing an opportunity to truly drive and scale this mission. And further, that the partner that comes along at that time may not be as willing or as able to support us and to adopt and to be flexible and think differently about how a small food company can be a part of a big food company and how we can affect our food system and our agriculture system." And so for those reasons, it's a no-brainer for me. Money doesn't matter. We got to do what's right for what we believe in.
That's really amazing and profound. The Barcode Podcast is produced by Barcode Media, where our purpose is to equip emerging consumer brands. Go to barcodestartup.com to learn more about what we do. While you're there, you can also read full transcripts of podcast episodes, as well as get additional tools to help you grow your consumer packaged goods business. Now back to the episode. So you made the decision, and then you had to put legs to it, right? So then there's the season of integration, which I'm sure comes with plenty of challenges. I know Taylor and Katie, and their really strong, passionate personalities, and to integrate those strong, passionate personalities into a large multinational conglomerate is, I'm sure, came with moments of friction along the way and that sort of thing. How did you guys navigate when you made that decision? Transaction closes, you can finally tell people this happened, that sort of thing. Then you're like, okay, we're a mission-based company. Now we're a mission-based company that is part of a larger company, and our part of our goal is to impact the larger mission of that larger company. How did you guys have a strategy for how you wanted to impact General Mills?
Strategy is a big word, right? I mean, we knew we wanted to. We were resolute in that and passionate about it, and we knew we'd figure it out. And one of the ways, without having the answers, it'd be foolish to say we had the answers going in, because you have to understand what you're working with,
right?
And in some cases against, in order to implement that sort of change. I think it comes with influence. I think influence comes with results, and I think it comes with people. We did two things, I would say, as far as a strategy goes early on, before figuring out, much more focused how to attack it. One thing was, we talked about it all the time. Katie and Taylor wrote the first letter after acquisition saying, listen to what we say and watch what we do. I understand that you have your judgments and reservations, but trust us. At least give us the benefit of the doubt. And if we prove wrong, then feel free to blast away.
And I'm sure you guys had to weather some blowback.
Absolutely.
In that moment.
Yeah. But the other thing was, internally, was telling people over and over and over again, we're going to change General Mills. We're going to change General Mills. We're going to change the way that people do their jobs and the processes, and how we think about our consumers, and how we think about our people, and how we think about our businesses and their impact on the broader picture, including, triple bottom line of outcomes. Initially, that was met with a lot of, kind of laughs and maybe even some sneers, perhaps. Yeah, right. Who are these? The smallest brand in this entire portfolio. You've been around for, basically 3 years at this point, and you're going to come in and change us. That's great. We know what we're doing. You guys just stand back and watch. We weren't going to let that attitude prevail, and we weren't going to let it happen. We were defending something, which is why our first year, our battle cry, every year we had a new battle cry for the brand. And that first year, the battle cry was an adoption of a battle cry in the Texas Revolution of "Come and take it," right? And for us, this application was, we have something special, and we know we're on the radar for the industry and for our competitors, and so if you want to come make a Me Too product and try to capture share from us, bring it on. You better be really good, and you better stand for something really right, because we are and we do. And then the double entendre was internally to our new owner, and it was we're going to defend what we believe in, and we're going to hold all of ourselves accountable to the terms of this agreement that we made when we decided to sell the company, which is kind of goes back to those three things, right? And if you're going to try to corrupt or change or compromise something, we're not going to roll over on it.
I kind of picture you guys, sort of raising the "Come and take it" traditional Texas flag up above your headquarters on South Congress and here in Austin, and I actually picture it along the lines of the early stories of Steve Jobs with the Macintosh division of Apple when they hoisted a pirate flag above their little building over there, just saying we're doing a really different thing than everybody else over here is.
I think we painted a 20 by 30 foot mural on the side of the building with the "Come and take it" cannon and a bison
right
next to it, and we used General Mills money to do it. All of the money was theirs. They bought the company, but it wasn't adversarial.
Right.
It was just a testament.
You were literally planting a flag.
We were just holding everybody accountable to what we had agreed to.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to let, if there had been any component of lip service, we weren't going to let that slide.
Right.
And we wanted to find the path that worked. We knew that it was going to be different. We weren't opposed to that. But I think the other key thing too, though, is this all goes back to people. There is the system. There's no such thing as General Mills, the person. General Mills, the bad guy or gal, right? It's a compilation of people. And so going back to your question about our strategy, our other strategy was to motivate and to gain the support of and impassion and the General Mills people. And my thought was, if I can get 30,000 people to side with me on the front lines, good luck trying to create a policy that dissuades them.
That's right.
When they're motivated, when they're similarly motivated by their passions. And so, we started again essentially doing within our own organization what we were doing in the press and media and our social campaigns through content and education, talking about these important issues.
And you're publishing those really nice sustainability reports and I forget what you call them, the booklets.
Mm-hmm. The Impact Journal.
The Impact Journal, yeah.
Yep, and we were amongst a number of other things. And I think this is important to note too, because this is a process of learning for us. And again, big business is fundamentally bad in our preconceived mind, but realizing that, wait a minute, every single person, almost to an individual that's coming onto this team is incredible. They're experienced, they care, they want to learn, they're open-minded individuals. Now, when you start plugging into, again, the system and these broader processes, things start to get a little bit more rigid, and sometimes the systems and the bureaucracy has a way of chewing up and spitting out a result that doesn't align with all of the individual people within it. So we kind of went to work on how can we deviate from those processes.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, how can we demonstrate that a deviation can be successful, such that there's a willingness to change the processes. And those little sort of sprinkling those seeds, right? So working at the front lines, ground level, kind of creating an insurgent force within the organization, and then modeling, in our own sort of sandbox. Thankfully, we had a little bit of a barrier between us and the broader organization up front to think and act differently. Again, testament to General Mills for following through on that commitment to us to think and act and operate differently. They truly did and continue to.
That's excellent. So, and you had mentioned even, that people matter. One important people move is, in the midst of all of this, John Forker leaves, right? So how did you guys navigate the transition when John decided to leave Annie's and General Mills to do a new startup? One of the key people who had sold you on this vision that we understand, we get it, is no longer there. How did that impact the trajectory for you guys?
John's an incredible person, and we still have an incredible relationship with him. And there's no doubt that if it had not been for him, the deal wouldn't have gotten done. And if it hadn't have been for him, we wouldn't have been in an environment or in the environment and within the structure that we were. And so when he left, he didn't leave our lives, but he did move out of the General Mills organization. But what he left behind was, again, that intention, those commitments, that system and that model. And so we continued plugging away with what we were working on, and we're even able to continue to reach out to him and get support because Annie's had sold a year before us. I mean, I think maybe it was some series of events that maybe one bubble of acquiring Annie's, acquiring Epic, making some other investments, and then they sold Green Giant. Mm-hmm. Is a series of events that might have been tied together above my level in the organization.
Sure.
But it seems that way. So it was sad, as somebody that was to see them leave their mission and their brand and something that he had built personally as an extension of himself. Mm-hmm. But he was moving on to something that he was excited about to address, the issues and feeding the future of our population and Once Upon a Farm. And he wasn't leaving Annie's as much as he was called to do something else, and felt that he had left that team and organization in the best hands possible in terms of making that transition.
Now let's talk about, as you're continuing to steward the brand under the General Mills umbrella now, you are continuing to evolve your understanding of regenerative agriculture. Around this time, Taylor and Katie purchase and establish Rome Ranch. Talk a little bit about how you guys, that part of the journey, how you began to really go even deeper down this regenerative agriculture path and restoring Texas Hill Country land and the ecosystem.
I think once again, it's just a credit to the people that Katie and Taylor are, and the force,
absolutely,
that they are. And you mentioned it before, right? We had a long journey of learning, reading books, getting the academic side and the theory side, and going onto lands and getting firsthand accounts of what works and doesn't work in different applications and within different people and different situations. And all that's great. And then there's doing it yourself in your own application and context, right? And
raising bison, raising chickens, all the things.
And I think for Katie and Taylor to go out and and to say, hey, we're in a position in life now after what we've been through that we could bail on Epic, we could bail on this endeavor and take the money that we've and the financial freedom that we have, and go travel and live a life of somewhat luxury or whatever,
Sure.
Living on a beach, sipping cocktails, whatever you want to think of it, even
Sure.
though they're not cocktail drinkers.
That's right.
But instead they said, hey, we're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to double down on this cause that we truly believe in. And this isn't a hobby farm. This is a now 1,000-acre multi-species with hundreds and hundreds of animals operation and multiple employees that's doing a ton of outreach, creating a ton of education and awareness. We call Rome Ranch an educational facility and field experiment. So everybody from the senior leadership of some of the top retailers in the country to influencers to press and media, to television, all the way down to the local community, the people that live down the road or just wanting to learn and see where their food is coming from, or coming out there and learning. And I think that's incredibly important. And at the same time, I think that there was a realization that running these things is much more difficult and much more challenging and much more involved than we had even imagined with all of our experience. And again, once you get your own hands dirty, you learn and appreciate things a lot differently. And I think it's been valuable for us to have that experience. I say us, I use that term generously. This is, Rome Ranch is Katie and Taylor's owned
Right.
solely by them. They were generous enough to let me purchase some bison and run it on the land, and I get to go out and help with events and participate,
Right.
and occasionally get my hands dirty as well when they ask.
Has that experience given you guys, it seems like it's given you a new level of empathy for the producers that you've been working with and continue to work with in your new venture.
There's no doubt about it, right? I mean, when it comes to scaling these supply chains and driving this mission, there are hurdles that exist at every step of the way, at every level, at every role in the value chain. And we're definitely getting some more intimate understanding of what those hurdles are and how they feel as we look for solutions to, again, help people in different situations overcome them.
Yeah. One thing that I really love about the ethos that you and Katie and Taylor have, you're really fundamentally iconoclasts, and like you're not scared to shake up the status quo. You're not scared to run counter to maybe even 180 degrees in the opposite direction of where the zeitgeist is blowing. And so one thing that's happening right now, particularly in the natural and organic food space, is that everything is about plant-based, right? So it's everything from pea protein to lab concocted meat alternatives and all of this sort of stuff. And you guys have taken a really pretty radically different approach, and not out of dissimilar motives. Like, in fact, you are highly aligned in terms of the emphasis around sustainability and climate change and that sort of thing. But you've reached a series of fundamentally different conclusions about the solution to that. So talk a little bit about what you've learned, and maybe how what you've learned is different than what at least in the popular press gets talked about now.
It would be wrong of us to overlook a key part of the journey to even get to there, and that is, in that process of learning and that path that we were on, we were fortunate enough to cross paths with the Savory Institute, and Katie and Taylor were fortunate enough to go to Zimbabwe and meet him on a formerly desertified piece of land and see firsthand the tangible, albeit anecdotal, outcomes that can be produced by working in harmony with nature versus fighting it. And
so a desertified piece of land, just for clarity, is a piece of land that's been overgrazed, and typically maybe because of monoculture or other things, the soil content has been depleted. What else would we need to understand about what's actually happening there?
Easiest way to describe desertification is sort of what you said, right? It's an exhausting of and a degradation of your soil resource, such that it may transition from a thriving, balanced ecosystem into truly what we know of and think of today as a desert. And we would call a traditional row crop agriculture land a desertifying piece of land. You are mining the resources out of that ground, out of that soil that a thriving ecosystem created. You're doing nothing to regenerate or replenish those. The easiest way to
and in your definition, the sort of spraying of that field with nitrogen fertilizer is not replenishing anything, right?
No. It's a really ineffective and cheap Band-Aid, right?
Right.
Where in nature do you see a monoculture? You don't, right? Nature doesn't want to see 10% of the landmass of the United States covered in nothing but bare dirt and rows of corn.
Correct.
That is devastating.
Because the economic incentives have made it such that is the thing you can make the most money at.
Absolutely. And then you can add soybeans and some other key cash crops that we've begun to focus in on. So it's been helpful to understand that concept of desertification. Now keep in mind, I was going to point to this one thing before we get too far down the path, because it's a long one and there's a lot to glean, and folks can follow us on Epic and Forrest and Taylor as we produce this content. But the way to think about the way we've practiced agriculture broadly in our industrialized model is, what comes out of the ground or what is produced on the ground is, sort of like a checking account, and what's underneath the ground is the savings account. And we've been taking out of our checking. We've been harvesting those crops and we've been producing those animals, and we haven't been replenishing, putting money back into our savings account. And there's a shelf life to that. And the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations released a report recently, said that there's only 60 harvests left or 60 years of crop production on our planet based on our current system. And so we can say we're doing these inputs in our input-based industrial model, but those inputs are simply, again, a Band-Aid to produce a yield. It's not substituting or replenishing the actual land. And that's why you see the efficacy rates changing. That's why you see applications of glyphosates and again, herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, insecticides, and fertilizers, all having to get more and more and more application. And that's why...
And you're racing towards systemic collapse.
Which we've seen, in dozens and dozens of civilizations throughout history, practicing organic, practicing non-GMO, practicing local, practicing grass feeding. Time and again, we've seen massive civilizations rise and collapse because of resource degradation. And so regenerative agriculture isn't just grass feeding. It isn't just organic. It isn't just local. It's, again, trying to practice agriculture in nature's image. It's a reversal of a chemical input-based system and a celebration of biology and balance. And how do we dance with and harmonize with nature at scale to produce our food, and as opposed to, again, engaging in chemical and mechanical warfare with the land to create a monoculture as nature tries to restore balance.
What does that look like practically for people who maybe haven't visited as many farms or ranches as you guys have? I think there probably is a sense that, well, if I'm growing some crop over here, I can't just have cattle or bison or pigs. If they roam free, then they're going to eat up the thing that I was growing over here. So I can't. That doesn't work. What does it actually look like in a working regenerative farm?
Again, I can give a high level example
Sure.
for brevity, but it's different for every person. You got a variable
climates
set of
and
tools and
topography.
and different set of conditions and stuff. And so really, it starts with a mindset of a commitment to trying new things and pushing your comfort zone with an end goal of improving welfare and of animals and improving the land that you're stewarding. And you got to recognize too that historically, the largest herd of megafauna on our planet since the last ice age is bison, as an easy example. And
Right.
So 10,000 years ago to present, at a certain point for the majority of that time, there was herds of, somewhere between, depending on what numbers you support, 40 to 60 plus million bison roaming across North America, and these massive herds, intensely impacting lands and then moving on, and maybe not returning for some period of time. And there's reasons for all of that, right? There's birds migrating with them. There's predator species pressuring them. And again, this is the natural way. This is, the balance of life.
But they've got the excrement. They're so heavy. They're actually sort of tilling the soil with their hooves.
Yep, they're feeding the microbiome of the soil or the rhizosphere. Again, everything from what's going on under the crust to what's happening up in the solar system in terms of getting the energy of the sun down into the soil along with carbon in the process of photosynthesis, and how these animals help trigger and instill that and invigorate that process. So again, a lot of science, a lot of stuff to learn there. But we live in a day and age where we've nearly driven that massive herd of animals to extinction, and further we fenced everything in. And so that's not the way that our lands and our ecosystems evolved to function. We've disrupted significantly, and we'll never be able to return to that.
Right.
But what we can do is recognize that we have a massive opportunity to scale down those functioning systems and to, again, implement those on smaller scale lands. And, Rome is an example where, the bison are in, multiple, dozens of different paddocks, and they may not come back to one depending on the condition it's in for 6 months, and they may come back to another one every, 45 or more days. Again, trying to create that and replicate those relationships that existed historically, and the symbiosis that exists historically in nature, and again within the context. And so, that's the idea. That's the concept: is how do we farm? How do we ranch in nature's image, and aggressively work towards finding a system that works on our scale and in our context.
So the typical critique of meat eating, traditional meat eating, you've commoditized these cattle so that it's all just about how much weight. So you're packing them all into these really pretty gross environments, and they're finished with who knows what types of products in order to get them fattened up so that you're maximizing in that moment how much money you're getting out of a particular head of cattle. And so that's that world. But a lot of the critique ends up being around, well, actually livestock are a very inefficient source of calories, that cows are responsible for methane and other greenhouse gases to a disproportionate degree, and this sort of thing. How do you guys think about those standard tropes in the public discourse?
Yeah, those critiques are appropriate in certain applications. You know what I mean? The system that they apply to is dysfunctional. And when you study dysfunction, the result is dysfunction. Those models are built around, in a lot of cases, clear-cutting rainforest and, planting monoculture crops there with an input-based system, and then, shipping those inputs and outputs back and forth across long distances, and using them in an environment like you described in a confined animal feeding operation to put a ton of animals in a space where there's the intense use of antibiotics to sustain life in an environment that's not compatible with life, and promote rapid growth and generate high yield on a small amount of land with cheap inputs. And I think if you look at the life cycle assessments done on that system, it shows that for every pound of beef, there's 33 pounds of carbon equivalent emissions into the atmosphere. And that's messed up.
So your corrective to this is that it's not the cow's fault. It's the method of producing the cows or
Absolutely.
the beef.
And I think it's important to note that the system that we're supporting, we take those same life cycle assessments that look end to end. And we were fortunate enough to be a part of performing research on utilizing the same company that Impossible Burger did, showed that in this sort of regenerative model, in this particular application, we were sequestering 3.5 pounds of carbon equivalents per pound of beef produced. And even Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger are still carbon positive. They're still emitting 3.5 or 4 pounds, I think, respectively, of carbon equivalents per pound that they produce. So we're even a better solution than these companies that are coming on the scene and heralding themselves as solutions. And that's just on the carbon issue. That doesn't talk about the fact that they're heavily reliant on GMOs and monoculture and so on and so forth. And so all that to say, the narrative around agriculture and animal agriculture is, let's take a deceitful shortcut and take the worst representation of agriculture, of animal agriculture, and assign it to an entire industry. And that's dishonest.
Right.
It's not buying meat that's the problem. It's buying the wrong meat that's the problem. And so one of the things that we endeavored to do is create that awareness. And with Force of Nature, we're trying to fight that commoditization model that we talked about. And we're trying to celebrate and do what we say is, reclaiming the legacy of meat and producing the best meat on the planet for the planet. So how do we do that? There is no food revolution without the consumer. And right now we're living in a time where consumers have demonstrated time and again that they vote or they purchase in stronger and stronger alignment within their values. But they have to know. They have to know what the implications are of their decisions. And right now, sadly, a lot of really good people are complicit in advocating for systems that absolutely do not align with their values. And this isn't one of those contests or those elections where we can just say, I don't like either party, so I abstain from voting. If you're consuming, you're voting. And the majority of our meat production system is highly challenged and is bad, and it does need to change. Fortunately for those consumers, there are tons, hundreds of millions of dollars worth, billions of pounds of good meat. And by supporting that and by transitioning their purchasing habits and supporting those ranchers and producers and systems and casting those votes, the food system will change. Farmers, ranchers, big companies, small companies, they are going to give consumers what they want. And the determination of what consumers want comes from the cash register.
Absolutely.
And so Force of Nature is trying to do just that. We're trying to get distribution of good, honest meats into as many consumers' hands and make it available to as many consumers as we can, whether that be through food services, or whether that be through retail grocery outlets, whether that be through online e-commerce, whether that be through other creative means. We want to create a brand that tells that story and creates awareness of those issues and informs those consumers, so that such that within their own context and their own financial and values-based systems, they can at least be informed that when they make purchases, they're purchasing something to the best of their abilities that aligns with their own values.
So then you're also creating a market for those ranchers who may be in a remote rural area, and they don't have a way to produce, even if philosophically they want to produce better meat, honest meat. They don't really have that path to market, and that's an aspect of this ecosystem that you guys are trying to address as well, right?
Yeah, the industrialized model and truly centralized model is absolutely punitive to the individual on the land. And that's why you see the average age of farmers peaking out over the age of 60, and the future generations of those family-owned businesses and farms leaving. They've watched their lands that maybe one or two generations prior, they've heard stories about how beautiful and rich they were, and now they're seeing the results of their families having to become chemists, and maybe how that's impacting their health and their communities. And they'd love to be and think and do different. I mean, these are land stewards largely. And sadly, for small producers, where do they send their animals, right? And you got to think too that, again, going back to that commoditization yield model, if you have 5,000 cows going through a processing facility in a day, coming off of a feedlot that has tens of thousands or millions of cattle in a really confined area, that they're able to reach greater than full size in 2.5 years, maybe 2 years, maybe. And out on the land, it may take 1,000 acres to do what they can do in 100.
Right.
And it may take 3 or more years to do what they can do in 2. And you look at the throughput, they're able to get a lot more out in a much shorter time at a much lower cost than somebody doing it right. And the other issues are infrastructure and water and fencing and management. There are true costs. We're trying to accelerate those costs to the present, acknowledge them.
You're not pushing them down to your grandchildren's generation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And recognize them and make sure that we can create a system that supports those producers, those ranchers, and overcoming those barriers. And similarly, create some efficiency and some flywheels and with all of the stakeholders between those producers and the end consumer, right? And so creating incentives on the front end, trying to address hurdles on the front end, creating a pool through education and recognition and opportunity for consumers to vote for better food and to create that demand. And then similarly trying to address everything in between. It's hard when there's hundreds of brands out there. How do you know which one is right? And for these producer farmers too, if they don't have the ability to create their own website and hire their own marketing digital team and do their own processing and vertically integrate and so on, if they just want to raise animals, they don't have a lot of options. And so,
right.
We don't have it all figured out, but we know that we're trying to do the right thing on all ends. And we're fortunate enough to leverage our experience with Epic as we can leverage relationships and understandings as well, to try and address those things, to give, again, we're a mission-based company that our tool to drive change is by making meat available so that consumers can vote for what they believe in.
That's tremendously exciting. So today you guys make what kinds of products?
Right now our core products are that are most widely distributed, and it's fair to say that while we've been working on this and learning this industry for a long time, we truly only just launched with an intention to go beyond our own local geography.
Right.
A few weeks ago. I mean, I think we're
fresh.
sitting here late September, of 2019, recording this. So we've been building out our business locally, both in retail and in food service. We just launched online recently, and we're officially, after launching at Expo East, having conversations with larger distributors and retailers and other avenues. But the products right now that we've been able to commercialize are a series of ground meats, both in the retail and food service, mm-hmm. and based on proteins of bison, venison, elk, wild boar, and working on some other some other products as well. And we've developed an ancestral line too. It's part of a whole animal initiative by incorporating some of the organ meats. And these would have once have been, by our ancestors, the most highly sought after cuts of meat. And so we're trying to reintroduce those into our diet at a time when we're, for the first time in our history, our offspring have lower lifespans than our own, and we've lost touch with the most nutrient-dense foods we've been eating, and because our palates have changed. So can we reintroduce those in a form and format that's comfortable and that fits our palates? We're doing hamburgers, preformed patties, and then we're doing other in cuts like tenderloins and braising cuts like short ribs and ossobuco, and then in time we'd like to get into more traditional proteins as well, and we have plans and aspirations for doing that.
That's super exciting, and it's, as we get close to the lunch hour, it's making me hungry just thinking about it. So as you think about what's next for you guys at Force of Nature, like what is your, like, and maybe this is not how you think about it now, but like, what's your battle cry now?
I think at Epic, we, our moonshot goals were to become a household name and to convert 1 million acres of land from conventional farming to regenerative agriculture,
which was an ambitious goal at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
but one that you accomplished.
Yeah, one that we've accomplished. And so for Force of Nature, we're still toying around with those truly aspirational objectives. But I think two things we're starting to hone in on. So I'll share them now, but we'll see how that might change as we get closer to it. But one is to support the conversion of 1 billion acres of agriculture. 1 million seemed impossible, so why not just
go bigger? Go bigger, go home.
Why not go way bigger? And quite frankly, we need to. If we don't get to 1 billion as not as Force of Nature, I'm talking about as a planet, as a
but
species.
If you can be a catalyst to that as Force of Nature, then that would be an important role.
Absolutely. And then the other that we've toyed with is trying to get to a 1% share of the meat industry in this country,
which would be a substantial business.
It would be a substantial business. It would be massive by any standard. You talk about 1%, it seems small, but I think the reason that resonates with us is because if we were able to achieve that, the ripple effects would be profound. It would mean that we've paved a way for other brands, not our own, but other brands who believe in these concepts, to come in to the scene and, again, create that distribution and create that opportunity for consumers to vote. And it means that we've paved the way for those producers to make advances and changes and improvements in how they're stewarding the land. And it would mean that whether indirectly or directly, we're influencing that 1 billion acres. And so the implication of being 1% really is the implication for regenerative agriculture, and the implication for a profound impact on all of those things that we're trying to create improvements for. We're past the point as a society where sustainable is good enough. We're racing towards a cliff. So achieving sustainability at this rate doesn't change the outcome. The conversation has to change from doing less bad to doing more good. And that's really what we're trying to create an awareness and recognition of.
That's really powerful. Well, is there anything else that, like, as you guys are at this early stage of Force of Nature, that you would want people out there who are listening to this podcast to know about what you're doing or how they can support you guys?
I think one of the things, I think I'm going to blur the answer a little bit between Force of Nature and Epic, and again, just reiterate that there is no revolution without the consumer. So if anything that we've talked about inspires you, join the movement. Purchase differently, share information, do your own research to whatever extent you're willing to dive in, and if not, align and find an organization that you believe in and advocate for them. Challenge your own preconceived notion and your own conventions about what you are and aren't willing to do. One of the things that's paved the way for us to go so far down the wrong path and meat is a lack of understanding and a lack of willingness to engage with where our food comes from. And this concept of it takes life to sustain life. And if we continue to proceed with blinders on as consumers because we don't want to acknowledge that reality, that we're part of nature and that we are part of that process of life and death and decay, and then the emergence of new life. If we can recognize that we celebrate that balance, we celebrate that harmony in nature, and recognize that we have a role, an empathetic role, as human omnivores to support that process, and allow ourselves to remove the blinders to where our food is coming from, and to paying attention to the organizations and their treatment and their values and their applications of their businesses. That's going to be the way change happens. And then the other thing I would say that we need to challenge is our concept of what's good and what's bad. Big and bad is terrible, and that's where everybody, I think, who cares starts. And all of us who have fought and advocated and changed our values and done anything and everything we could within our abilities to fight for change have to ask ourselves the question that what does change look like, right? Even going back to my first days at Epic, what does success look like? I think success looks like the things that we believe in, improvements that we're seeking occurring at scale. And one of the greatest opportunities for implementing those things at scale is within a large business. And I think, I'll point back to our experience with Epic and General Mills and say that Epic's not perfect. General Mills is not perfect. I'm not perfect. But there's been a collaborative force there to try and drive change. And I think consumers have done a phenomenal job of holding all of us accountable to maintaining authenticity to what those original pursuits are and remain. And the example that I'll give for that acquisition and ultimate integration is that General Mills truly did just recently commit to converting 1 million acres from conventional agriculture to regenerative. I think that largely consumes up all of the supply chains for Cheerios and Nature Valley and other things. And so that goal of Epic that seemed like a long shot would never have happened if not for a big business, and then the willingness of big business to change because consumers directed them to do so.
Right.
And there never would have been an appreciation for a broader set of stakeholders, a broader set of success criteria beyond the bottom line of a large publicly traded company. And since then, the operating unit that we are a part of has changed its name to the triple bottom line operating unit, right? Defining success by outcomes produced for people, planet, as well as profit. Profit's important. It's okay.
Absolutely.
It's what makes business sustainable. So I think those are the most important things, right? They've also adopted and instilling a sense of mission and purpose behind all their brands, like fighting for something that their consumers care about. And so that's come from small business supported by somewhat evangelical consumers, disrupting and a large but willing organization, and that opportunity still exists. And I hope that we can transition those fans and those followers and those consumers over and educate and recruit more and new folks to this conversation in a bigger industry that's in more households and is a part of more diets, so that we can continue to carry the mission that we created there and bear that torch in a new context and one that we specialize in, right? Startups and small businesses that are fast growth and disruptive and exciting and mission-based.
Well, I have a feeling that's going to happen. So it'll be exciting to follow along. So everything that you've said has been insightful and inspiring, and I just want to thank you, Robby Sansom, one of the co-founders and CEO of Force of Nature, for joining us and sharing your experience, your stories, your insights, and really the heart and spirit behind what you guys are building that I think can impact us as consumers, impact us as entrepreneurs, and just as global citizens as well. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Ben. I really appreciate the time. It's been a lot of fun catching up.
For links to some of the people and companies we mentioned during our conversation today, be sure to visit barcodestartup.com/podcast for the show notes and a complete transcript of this conversation. Thank you so much for listening to the Barcode Podcast, and we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation to help equip emerging consumer brands.